Artsy and Near Hindi the Artian.
All right. So art in tech, that's what we will have in the next 20 minutes. And before I let Carter kind of introduce himself, I actually want to introduce you to the company he founded called Artsy. And Artsy is the global platform, I think, the biggest marketplace for collecting and discovering art. Now I'm going to read you some of the numbers of Artsy, and stay with me because they are impressive. So they host over 160 auctions, both live and online and offline. They have more than 2,000 global partners, including the top museum in the world, the Louvre, the Guggenheim, and more. They work with over 60 different international art fairs, including the Armory Show and Arco. They spread across 90 countries, and they have more than 800,000 works of art on their platform, valued more than $30 billion from 70,000 different artists. After raising $100 million from what I call the A-list of investors, such as Jack Dorsey, co-founder of Twitter, Eric Schmidt, chairman of Google, Joe Gebbia, co-founder of Airbnb, Peter Thiel from PayPal, Bob Pittman, co-founder of MTV. Carter, I want to ask you, what brought these people for Artsy? What is Artsy?
Well, that's a very nice introduction, Nir, and it's an honor to be here in Madrid and to get to soak up the energy here. I've actually never been before. I think one of the reasons why we've been able to attract such an incredible list of not just investors, but really just the people that actually work at Artsy, the team that makes all those numbers possible, is that I think people are very attracted to the scale of the vision and the impact that it can have on humanity. Artsy started with a very simple premise, which is, why is there not one website where you can find all the world's art, where anyone in the world, as long as they have an internet connection, can learn anything they want about all the world's art? Anyone who wants to buy art, who wants to sell art, they have one place they can go. This is a world that's clearly going to have many more people engage with art, many more people buying art, and ultimately many more artists in the world able to make a living and pursue their passions in a more sustainable way. And it's a big vision that attracted a lot of people. And I think that was actually what I was drawn to in the beginning as well.
So it's interesting because you are kind of what's connect both what I call right brain and left brain, and it seems that we are living in time that we kind of focus only on one side of the brain. You are a computer scientist and you are deep-rooted in the art, and it's kind of all the time made me wonder also from my own experience that entrepreneurs and artists are much more similar than what we tend to think. But why is it that we kind of see them so separate? Why art is so separate from entrepreneurship and technology?
It's a really good question. At Artsy, our core value is actually art meets science. You can even take our logo and extend it to say that core value. I think it's a great question, because art and science actually used to be much more related. If you think about the Renaissance, you think about the prototypical Renaissance man, Leonardo da Vinci. He was both an artist and he was both a scientist. And in fact, for him, they were not even different crafts. His science was his art. His art was his science. I think in modern day society, because there's been so much emphasis on success and on scaling and on trying to be a professional in a world that is getting exponentially more complex every day, there is this need we feel to be highly specialized. And so a lot of children, they go to school or they go to college and they're forced to make a decision. You choose now. Are you going to be creative, become an artist, and probably not, make a living? It's a very daunting thing. Or are you going to go into business? Are you going to learn numbers? Are you going to learn how to scale things? And only now, I would say, in technology are people starting to understand the core relationship between the two of them. I was very lucky. For me, my mom was in finance, and her father, she comes from more of that business side, her number side. Her father was a physicist. Her grandfather was also a physicist. They actually came to Europe before she was born. And so, she every day walked me to school on the way to work, and she quizzed me on math problems. And that's actually why I went to Princeton, because it had the top physics program. I thought I was going to be a theoretical physicist when I grew up. But things didn't turn out that way. And I think the reason for that is because I had a different influence coming from my father. So my father's entire life has been about art. I grew up in a bedroom covered inch to inch with canvases. I never even had posters in my room because I already had, we didn't have space for paintings. They were on the chairs, they were on the furniture. You couldn't even sit down in our living room. There was so much art everywhere. And so he was always taking me to galleries, always taking me to museums, always talking to me about the art. And so for me, growing up as a child, art was this thing that it was easy. Everyone had access to it. There was no feeling of exclusivity or of not being cool enough. I never felt like I couldn't ask stupid questions. I remember saying to my dad, "What's the point of that artwork? I could do that." And then he would very patiently explain to me why I could actually not do that. And having that patient, loving guidance from a young age made me think of art the same way most people think about music or think about film. And it was only when I got to college and I started talking to more people about art that I realized that was a very unique experience. Actually, most people, when you ask them about art, you say, who's your favorite musician? Who's your favorite DJ? Everyone has an immediate answer. What's your favorite film? Oh yeah, we can talk about film, but who's your favorite artist? And people might take a little bit longer to get back to you. Oh, I don't know if I know art as well, or I don't know if I'm cool enough, or there's almost this feeling of art being this insular world that you're on the outside of. And when I started to realize that this thing I just took for granted, easy access to art, was actually a huge privilege, and most people didn't have that access, it kind of started me on this path, saying, well, why is art being treated differently? And I think the answer is really about access. You go back 100 years, and the music world was actually smaller. If you go back before the record player, before the radio, the music world was smaller than the art world was today. If you wanted to go see a musical performance by professional musicians, the chances were that you were part of a small elite class. You were a part of the aristocracy. It was really only with the radio and the record player that music became a mainstream thing, and now no one can imagine life without music as part of your daily experience. But the radio and the record player, they work for audio, but they don't work for visual. They don't work for communicating images, and that's why the internet now is changing everything, and that's why art is starting to become a much bigger, a much more ubiquitous part of the human experience. And all Artsy was trying to do was say, great, let's be that one website that anyone can go to, like Spotify or Netflix for music and film, one place they can go to for art.
So it's kind of I want to ask you the next question, because we talked about it in previous conversation, and it seems that we are living in such a different economy that the skill set that we need is different, and the future is kind of very blurry. And you all the time speaks about the next human evolution. And I'm interested to know, what is this humanistic evolution that you see in your eyes?
Yeah, I love to talk about that. Well, first, before I talk about a very lofty topic, such as the next phase of human evolution, I'll talk a little bit first about what is just art's, if we're going to talk about what art's role is on humanity at a global scale, it's useful to understand what is art's impact on an individual human scale. Like, when you actually look at art, what is happening? Is nothing happening, or is it changing you? And there's actually been some really interesting studies that have looked at the impact of art in a lot of different contexts. They've looked at the impact of art on people, elderly with cognitive diseases like Alzheimer's or dementia. They've looked at the impact on communities and crime rates. They've looked at the impact on children and empathy. And every time they've actually found that there's very striking patterns. It turns out that whenever you see a new work of art, or even art and music and film, they're all kind of converging into self-expression. Whenever you guys hear that amazing new song that you've never heard before, you go, wow, like, how did they even come up with that song? Or when you see that beautiful artwork, where did that even come from? So that reaction you're having, that moment of awe, that experience you are experiencing consciously has a physical analog inside your brain. Whenever you have a new experience, you're exposed to a new idea, new pathways are physically being formed in your brain. New neural pathways are lighting up, and they've actually shown this in an fMRI. And that's why if I show you the same artwork again tomorrow, you might still think, yeah, it's a great artwork, it's beautiful, but you're not going to have that, wow, I've never seen that before reaction. And the reason why is because those new neural pathways have formed. And so when you see that same work again, they map into the same neural pathways you already have. Every time you see something new, or you experience something different, whether it's a new song, a new work of art, a new idea, a new concept, a new belief, new neural pathways are formed. And previous neural pathways have to adapt to these new ideas. That's why if I was to tell you guys something that you did not enjoy hearing that went against your existing belief systems, the reaction that you would have if you put your brains in an fMRI is no different than the reaction of physical pain as if I pinched you. Being exposed to a conflicting viewpoint causes certain brain structures that were in place that allowed you to hold the previous viewpoint. It forces them to break down and change, or it forces you to, no, that's a dumb idea. That's clearly stupid. How many times have we written off an idea we don't like? Or how many times has our idea that we've shared with someone else who doesn't agree with us, how many times have they written off our idea because it conflicts with their previous belief systems? This starts to help us understand the power of self-expression in art. It's not just a nice thing. It's not just a way to blow off steam. It's not just a thing that rich people can spend their money on. By actually expanding the neural pathways in your brain, art, music, film, they are expanding our consciousness, and they're also helping break down old ego structures. They are making us more open-minded to new ideas, to new thoughts. They're making us less brittle and less resistant to our old thought patterns. They also expands empathy. There's been studies where if you take groups of children and you have them do random activities like communal activities or building activities, but in the case where they have children listen to music or look at art, afterwards when they test their emotional intelligence after several days of this, the children that were exposed to music or art, their emotional intelligence and their empathy, their ability to work together as a team is actually much higher. This is another property art has. It doesn't just expand consciousness. By seeing an artwork, you're able to see someone on a very human level. You're not seeing them, oh, they have this political belief, or they're that religion, or that sexuality, or that gender. When you see their art, you see them on this very pure human level. It allows you to connect with them as a human without all the barriers of labels and concepts and judgments that we put between ourselves and the world around us. Art is one of the most powerful global diplomats. Artsy actually has the largest average transaction distance of any website in the world, over 3,000 miles. Why is that? It's because people are inherently attracted to art and experiences that are from different cultures. I love to go search through the art that's from new emerging artists in Berlin. It's a way for me to go on a journey without having to pay for an expensive plane ticket. It's a way for me to understand. I'm so excited to see the museums in Madrid. I'm visiting a museum today and a different one tomorrow, because I think it's actually one of the most powerful ways to understand someone's culture. Art is the ultimate diplomat. It lets you see other people, see other cultures from across geographic divides. Now, why is this so important for where humanity is today and where we're going to be in the near future? So this is where it's going to get a little bit out there. And this is not Artsy's opinion, this is my opinion. So feel free to disagree, but I think it makes for a good dialogue. So I actually believe that's what is going on in our lifetimes. That what we will see in our lifetimes is that we will get to be the last generation of humans. I don't mean that in a negative way, I actually mean that in a positive way. I think where we are today is actually quite similar to where life was about 2 billion years ago, when single-cellular organisms were cooperating and collaborating. And then they started to share DNA with each other. And then they started to reproduce not as a single cellular organism, but as a multicellular organism. And if you were to be in space looking down at humanity from above, you would see all these individual humans, and then all these individual tribes, and then these individual villages, towns, cities, nations, and now you see a thriving global economy that is starting to more and more resemble a gigantic meta-organism. Instead of individual human consciousnesses, one might call us a giant collective consciousness. And I actually believe that this collective consciousness that we are increasingly becoming a part of is actually going to merge not just all humans together, the same way single cellular organisms start to merge together and form multicellular life, but I believe it's also going to be a merger with the technology that we're building, with the artificial intelligence, and also with the intelligence that's in nature, that is in the planet all around us. In Silicon Valley, you hear people talk about the singularity, which is the idea of when artificial intelligence will become so advanced that it becomes more intelligent than humans. But I think that is only one component of this collective consciousness. That is the artificial intelligence component. But this singularity point that we're heading towards will actually be the merger of artificial intelligence, human intelligence, technology, and also the natural intelligence in nature. So on one hand, what does that actually mean in practice? Well, it's really hard to know. If you were to ask those single cellular organisms, well, what's life going to be like when you're multicellular? They wouldn't really be able to tell you. You'd say, well, you're going to be able to create art. You're going to be able to send people to the moon. You're going to be able to write poetry. And the single cellular organisms might say to you, so does that mean there's going to be more glucose? Their only way of conceptualizing these things is through what they already know. So it's like, so more glucose. And you're like, well, there might be more glucose, but there's so much more than that. The point of this is it's very hard for us as individual humans to understand what this next great phase will look like. And that shouldn't be surprising. Ask people from 20 years ago, what would the world look like just 20 years later? Before the internet, before iPhones, before apps. All those things happened in like under 15 years ago. And they would have trouble telling you what life would be like just 15 years in the future. So what do we think life will be like 30 years from now, as these technology cycles continue to accelerate? My point is it's in a very exciting but also a very scary time. Because on one hand, while we have global connectivity and global culture and global innovation, we also have a lot of very scary things happening in every part of the world. You have a lot of people who are scared and are resisting this next phase, this coming together, this convergence. And you see that all around the world in various different, often very disturbing ways. And this is why I actually think art is not just a nice to have, but I think art, technology, and innovation right now are must-haves in order to enable us to safely come together and transcend into this next phase. Because if art on an individual human level allows us to have more empathy and more consciousness, it's also an agent for doing that on a global level. I remember going to the Venice Biennale in, I believe, 2014, or was it 2015? And I remember that India and Pakistan had each chosen artists to represent their country. And those are two nations that have a lot of historic tensions. And so it's an interesting question, how would the artists respond to that? Well, the artists decided to work together and create a joint artwork together, where you walk into a palazzo and via a sort of virtual reality installation, it transports you to another room on the other side of the world in Pakistan. And I thought that that artwork was such a fitting metaphor for the power of art to connect us across divides, for the power of art to heal wounds, for the power of art to create greater empathy, not just on an individual level, not just on a national level, but also on a collective level. I think it's very important that if we are going to make it into this next phase of, we don't know what it will be like, but for us to get there safely, I think art, not just technology, is going to play a very critical role there. And so I guess I hope everyone in this room can look for ways not just to keep innovating and advancing your businesses or scaling your businesses, but also look for ways to bring in more art, more creativity, not just into your personal lives, but also into your businesses and into your communities, so that we can all, hopefully face this new world more together with more empathy.
Great. So with that, we already finished our short time, but we will continue on the Sandbox stage with more art and culture in tech. Carter, thank you very much for coming to Madrid and sharing with us everything you know about art.
Thank you for having me here. I appreciate it. Thank you, guys.